I have wept at Aiden's grave many, many, many times. And as I've done that over the years, it gets to the point not where I become numb, but where I've actually processed the grief and the pain out. I don't have to go there now. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wow, it's been a year and a half. I haven't even been there and so forth. But so there's this stuff of healing by going to it. And I try to point that out, making God the central focus of healing. He's the source.
You've written this book about something that happened 15 years ago. So the book is just out,
Mm-hmm.
called Shattered, Surviving and Thriving After the Worst Pains of Life. So give us the nutshell version, and then let's get into it, because
All right.
processing this with God is it's the big picture. So yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, so the big picture is we lost our son Aiden to a sudden drowning accident 15 years ago. And what I wanted to write about was not just the story and how God is good in the midst of the story, but what do we do typically? We kind of hide our pains from the Lord, and that the actual opposite is true, that if we allow God into our pain, it actually helps us process it, and that we find there's hope to survive and thrive uh, after the worst pains of life if we'll let God touch our wounds. And so that's what I was trying to drive at.
So give us the backstory, Rip. Where'd you get a name like Rip? Where'd you get a cool name like Rip? Let's start there. Rip Wahlberg.
Yeah, so I was, my name is Richard, but my parents always intended for me to be called Rip. I was named for my dad's best friend that he grew up with, and that was my given
Yeah.
nickname from birth.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Trumbull, Connecticut.
Oh, in Trumbull. So you're a Connecticut boy,
Yep,
like me.
I am a Connecticut, New England native.
And when did you find God? When did God come into your life? As I mentioned, I know you through our mutual friend Ken Fish.
Yep.
When did that happen in your life?
So grew up in the church, went to Black Rock Church for until my mom passed away when I was 13, went to Black Rock Church. I remember walking into my mother's bedroom when I was like 4 years old. I don't know how I know I was four, but I seem to remember I was like four. Got up on her bed and said in the morning, was like, Mom, I want to have Jesus in my heart. And right then and there, she's like, okay, let's go. And prayed with her, and that was kind of, that was that beginning. And I've always loved God's word, always had kind of an affinity for it. Like I'd say it comes quickly to me, and I've always been passionate about faith.
So when did you decide you wanted to go into the ministry, or how did that happen? When did you get married? I want to get your
So
story.
when I was 15, I had gotten back from a trip with Teen Missions where I went to Alaska for the summer. This was actually the summer after my mom passed away, and came back, and I was like, just, this is amazing. I love God's word. I experienced him for the first time right like on that missions trip, where the presence of God came in the room, filled it like you couldn't breathe and you didn't want to breathe improperly. It was awesome. And I came away from that going, I want to be in ministry. Like, I want to do this somehow. And so when I was 15, that was kind of the initial, the thing that was the catalyst for me wanting to go into ministry. Kind
You
of took some turns and
you
stuff, but
mentioned
eventually
losing your
landed
mom
there.
at 13. That's a huge thing. I mean, here we are. The book is about losing your 4-year-old son, but that's a big
Yeah.
deal for a 13-year-old boy to lose his mom. I mean, that must have been very difficult right there. A lot of people turn away from God because of things like that, especially young people.
Yeah, it rocked our family pretty good all the way to the core. I mean, we were never really the same. We kind of held it together, but you know, by God's grace, like my dad now lives 3 miles from me, and that's a wonderful thing. But yeah, it rocked us for a while, and I didn't process that probably till I was about 30 years old.
Man.
It was interesting.
But so you knew early on, obviously, that you wanted to pursue your faith, that it was the most important thing to you. So what did you
Yes.
do about that? When did you get married? Talk about that.
So, I kind of have backed into ministry, like a lot of people will go into school and whatnot. I got trained up in the church, was a vineyard pastor, went to a vineyard church in New Haven, got trained and equipped, came down here. After we got here into Pennsylvania in Lancaster, about 4 months later, I was like, God, why are we here? What did you do? And he spoke. I said, you don't just up and move a family with 5 kids for no good reason. And he immediately said, I brought you here because I'm going to move the other pastor on into a different assignment, and I'm going to give the church to you. Don't do a thing. You don't have to do anything for it. I'm going
God
to give it
said
to
this
you.
to you.
100%.
So you're one of those
Yeah.
people that hears from God. I like that. It's
Yeah.
a lot of people want to hear from God. I'm one of them, and sometimes we hear from God. But some people, like you and Ken Fish, you have a real gift from God that you're able to hear Him in a way that's just amazing to me when you just put it that way, so matter of factly.
Every now and then. But yeah, it was interesting. It's a whole story to itself. And so yeah, about a 2 years later or so, like they approached us, and that ball started rolling, and we eventually took the church over in time. But then we had this hiccup of this book right in the midst of it.
Yeah, this is not a
Um,
hiccup. This is like an
yeah,
earthquake, the loss of a child.
yeah, this was an earthquake.
This is a big,
Three
big,
weeks
big
after
thing.
they, sorry, 3 weeks after they announced to the church that we were going to take the church over, that's when everything blew up and Aiden drowned. So we got delayed in that transition a while, but yeah.
Do you write in the book about how this happened, or is that something you don't want to go into?
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, the book starts out with the phone call from my wife, um, where I was hanging sheetrock in my garage with my father-in-law and my best friend, and my phone rings, and it's the hottest day of the year in the summer, and I pick it up. It's Anne Marie, and she says, "Rip, you got to come to Connecticut right now. Aiden just drowned." And my mind just exploded. Like, wait. And I had to kind of catch up to what she said and absorb it for like half a second, but there was such urgency in her voice, I couldn't wait,
I mean,
to catch
you're a
up.
4 hour drive
We're 4 hour drive from to Trumbull. Yeah,
from and you know how
absolutely.
I know that? I was in Lancaster recently and drove to Danbury, Connecticut, and it's a
Nice.
4 hour drive if you're going 75. Um, Honestly, that's a long way to get a call like that.
Yeah.
I mean, so your wife was in Connecticut visiting family, or what? How did it happen?
Yeah. So she had taken all 5 of our kids back to Connecticut to see some friends of ours, very close friends of ours. In fact, we just saw them a week ago and had dinner with them. So we are still friends with them closely. Um, she took them up there. They were hanging out at their pool in Trumbull, and Aiden just kind of slipped under their radar for like just enough time. And in the hot tub across the pool, he just was like, "Oh, I'm going to jump out of the pool, go hang out in there for a second." And we think, I think what happened was he got caught between in the deep spot between where the bench, like where the seats would be, and his little 4-year-old legs couldn't touch. And I think he got stuck in the middle there of that. So they looked up and they're like, "Wait, where's Aiden? We see all the other kids. Where's Aiden?" And then boom, everything went crazy. And that's when she called.
I'm talking to Rip Wahlberg. The book is Shattered: Surviving and Thriving After the Worst Pains of Life. We'll be right back. Folks, I hate to interrupt, but I just don't want you to miss any of the content we're putting out on here. We've just got some amazing stuff. So would you do yourself a favor and hit the subscribe button so we can make sure you don't miss anything? I promise you, great stuff coming up. Hit the subscribe button. Thank you. Welcome back. I'm talking to Rip Wahlberg, pastor, author. The book is Shattered: Surviving and Thriving After the Worst Pains of Life. Rip, you just described getting a phone call. You're in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's a hot day, and you get a call from your wife that your 4-year-old son, Aiden, has drowned.
Hmm.
and to come to Connecticut. What I just what goes through your head now? You're going to get in a car and drive to
The
Connecticut,
fir-
thinking about the
yeah,
fact
the
that you've
first thing
lost
that
your
goes through
son.
my head, first thing that goes through my head is, well, just do CPR. Like that's what they do on TV, and it works. And in my head, I'm trying to catch up, and so I go back into my house. My father-in-law's there, Dave is there, and I put my tool belts down, and I just fell on the ground and screamed, and didn't say anything to him. Walked into our bedroom, changed my shirt, left my shorts, took my keys, and I walked down and I said, I got to go to Connecticut right now. Aiden just drowned, and that was it. I didn't say anything more to them. I got in my truck. I was gone within 5 minutes, and starting to just crying and whatnot, um, and I stopped to get gas, and I just was like, do they even know? Does people around here even know? Like my world just exploded, um, you know, and then God said to me, then He goes, don't worry about a thing, just get there. I'm going to take care of you. This is all on me. And He did. It was really amazing. We people came out of the woodwork with generosity to support us in every kind of way. It was amazing.
I mean, I imagine this must have been tough on your other kids.
Oh yeah, I mean, when I finally got there, they they all came running to me, and I'm trying to comfort them. And by then, Anne Marie was back at the house. They had taken Aiden by that time, and she was back at the house too. And they were just, what do we do? And there's this chunk of you that was just viciously ripped out of all of us. And so they're we got them help then. They're still kind of processing some of it now, even. But yeah, it was pretty traumatic for them. Absolutely.
And what about your wife? Again, I can't really imagine. Most people can't, but I know there are people listening right now who have lost kids. And how do you? What do you? There are a lot of people that maybe they aren't where you are with the faith. They don't want to hear about God because
Hmm.
it's just too painful. How could God? That's the question. How could God allow that?
Right.
Do you deal with that in the book?
Yeah, I try to deal with the theodicy a bit. Like, is God capable, but won't, or willing but incapable? And I try to deal with some of that in the book. It was obviously, I knew that Anne Marie's hardest thing was that this happened on her watch, and so just tried to support her in that. I never wanted to, and I never have put pressure on her about that. I was like, no, this is just like, we're good. This happened. Um, but she wrestled with it for quite a number of years. Yeah, absolutely. Clearly and understandably, right? She wrestled with that. And I knew the ways in which it was gonna rock her, and it absolutely did. She's doing wonderful about it now. 15 years in, she's gotten some healing about it. She still processes some things, but God did do a work in her once she kind of let Him get close, and He did take that, like the guilt that she was carrying. He did take it from her eventually,
And
but she had to let Him get close.
what made you write about it now, 15 years later?
Um, it's interesting. So I spoke at the funeral, and it seemed like whatever I said was profound for people. I tried to, instead of say, "Hey, let's have a life celebration of a 4-year-old," like this is a traumatically cut short life. Um, I tried to be real, honest, and genuine instead, and then glorify God in the destruction kind of thing instead. So I wanted to write something, but I didn't know what. And so I just kind of let it formulate in me for many years. I think it was like 9 years before I felt like it was really about ready to formulate. A number of things came together, and I just kind of let it ruminate. I took notes and whatnot for a long time. Even stuff that I heard on your show with you and Hugh Ross made it into the book, about the eclipse. Remember the eclipse that was a couple years ago? And Hugh Ross said on your show, he said, the occulting event is going to last, say 2 minutes and 47 seconds. And in my world, I was like, a cult. Why did he say a cult? Because in my world, that's this, that, and the other thing that we do ministry to. But what I realized, and God gave me a picture, was all this pain sits like this thing in front of the truth of the cross, and it filters information to us.
Okay, just to be
And
clear, we were talking about on my program. I was talking to Hugh Ross, who
mm-hmm,
I've written about in my book, "Is Atheism Dead?" His books kind of turned me on to the whole world of science, apologetics, really amazing. But yeah, he
yep,
was on my program talking about an eclipse, and
yep,
obviously an eclipse. He referred to it as an occultic event. Is that right?
not a cultic, occulting,
Occulting.
the
Okay, but to
occulting.
occult is to cover or to hide. So
Yes,
the
exactly.
occultic, when we talk about the occult, we're talking about
Yep,
the hidden mysteries. That's the dark side. But the actual
right.
word means it in the way that you're using it. Yeah.
Exactly. So he used it appropriately in a scientific frame, and yet it was descriptive. And I was like, so God gave me a picture of this, that the pains of our life filter the truth of the cross. So we start taking all this information. We say, well, maybe God this and maybe that, and our job is to, how do we move that idol that sits then in front? And so I just took, like, through ministry, through time. I took a lot of time, just kind of wait and practice and try things out, and slowly it got into the book, and the book started to take form. And I asked God, I'm like, God, I got it in my head and my heart, but can you help me figure out how to organize it? And that's when he showed me, break it into three parts. Like, the first part is the story through the first year. The second part is dealing with the theodicy. Like, what do? We
You,
avoid
you
the
need to
pain.
explain the word theodicy. Not everybody listening knows what theodicy is. We're not talking about the Odyssey by Homer. No, we're talking about the word theodicy. I mean, you can explain it or I can explain it, but I want people to understand what you're saying.
Yeah, so theodicy is like, why do bad things happen to good people kind of thing, and where is God when it hurts type stuff. So if
The
God is
theodicy
good,
is how do you reconcile God with evil? I mean, ultimately, right? It's
yes, in a broken
it's sort of
world.
how do you theologically reconcile a good God, an all powerful God, with
Yeah,
evil? And everybody has that question. I don't get it, God. If you're all powerful, why do you let evil exist? And so something like this happens in a family, and the first normal question everybody has is, God, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make
yep.
sense. Why? It doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. And so we see the same thing going on in the discussions of Job. Like, and so I talk about that in the book. Like, Job and his friends are trying to figure out, well, why this happened to you? And Job's like, I was a righteous man. There was no reason for this. And they come back at him and stuff. So I talk about a number of those things. What do we do with our pain? We typically hide it from God. We avoid it ourselves because we don't want to feel it. Um, and yet, like, Jesus even asked God, for the Father, for the same, excuse me, for the same thing. Like, Lord, if there's any way to avoid the cross, please. And the silence of the Father was like, no, no, we have to do this. And so I point out that the way is like straight through the pain, not to avoid it, but to go through it. So like, I would go to his grave. I would sit there. I've fallen asleep on Aiden's grave. I have wept at Aiden's grave. Many, many, many times. And as I've done that over the years, it gets to the point not where I become numb, but where I've actually processed the grief and the pain out. I don't have to go there now. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wow, it's been a year and a half. I haven't even been there, and so forth. But so there's this stuff of healing by going to it. And I try to point that out, and making God the central focus of healing. He's the source.